everybody in the world has the responsibility for maintaining the peace of the world. That is true for everybody, not only Americans in America, but everybody in the world, whoever they are, have the responsibility for world peace. Now, practically, those so-called democracies who have some sort of say, even if it is only by putting the vote down on a card in a system which may or may not work, is more or less imperfect, have the responsibility of using it and bringing a result in that way. They have perhaps more responsibility than have the starving millions of the world, the poor, the hungry, those who are no connection with any political structure whatsoever, and so have no means of making their needs felt. Needless to say, they are those with the greatest needs of all. But they have no voice, and it is precisely that voice which Maitreya will give to them. He will give voice to the needs of the poor and the hungry and the displaced and the sitting in jail people of the world. Hundreds of thousands of people are in jail simply for the crime of having a different point of view from that of their present government. And these people have no voice. It's taken for granted that they be incarcerated and languish in prison, very often tortured to boot. Maitreya will speak for them and for all who need a voice and have no voice. But those who have today a voice, who have education, who have the voting system, who have a degree of democracy, have a special responsibility. And when Maitreya comes out, I think you will find there will be two responses. There will be a response of the fundamentalists of all kinds, not just Christian, but of all kinds, who will look at this with great concern. And some, a minority, will think this is the Antichrist. As Constance Cumby wrote so long ago, Alice Bailey, Benjamin Creme, David Spangler, and so on, all these New Age freaks, they were all in the control of this man, Maitreya, so-called, who is really the Dark One, you know, the devil incarnate, and will be believed by a relatively small number, a minority of fundamentalist Christians. Fundamentalist Jews, well, there's no saying, they don't, you'll never set their mind at rest. They're waiting for the Messiah, and they think it's a man who died in New York a couple of years ago, and of course it isn't. It's Jesus, who's been around for 2,000 years and came 2,000 years ago as the Messiah. And they are going to find it quite difficult, I think, to take Maitreya as Maitreya. But when they do, then it will transform the whole scene in the Middle East. I'm talking about the political effects of this, the gaining of unity through political action, and the need for the realization by the people, all people, but the educated and authoritative, articulate people of the world, to make known, to see, to understand, and to realize the need for unity on an international scale. Hence the necessity for all the nations to work together. Nothing will change if they don't. We imagine, or many people imagine, that Maitreya is going to come out and start speaking, and then the masters, one by one, will be brought forward and start speaking, and that the world will listen to them and start changing. It isn't as simple as that. Everything has to be done by humanity. That means it has got to have not necessarily 100% consensus, but a large degree of approval by most of the people in the world. Otherwise, it won't stop, it won't stick, it won't act, it would be an infringement of free will if humanity made decisions on the strength of advice from Maitreya or any of the masters which had not already had the approval of the vast majority of humanity. We are not any longer going to go on simple majorities like a political party, but that reality will persist to a degree for a long time, aided and abetted by the advice of the masters, which will help to form it and transform it into a consensus. But unless it has a degree of consensus, nothing will happen. There will be no changes. They cannot be imposed. They cannot be imposed because it would infringe free will, and they cannot be imposed because it wouldn't last. Anything you impose will not last unless it has the approval of the majority of people. And then, of course, everything that is changed is open to counter change. Everything that you make is open to its opposite. And so people will reflect, is this the best way to do it after all? And they will come up with something else and so on. It's a living, creative process. It isn't just changing the set of structures for another set of structures. It's changing the present set of values for another set of values. And these values are not held at the same level by all the people, and they're not held with the same intensity. They are not lived by masses who think that they hold them, and so on. So it's a very, very complicated thing, the human psyche and its body of beliefs and expectations and hopes. But speaking broadly, the humanity will be invited to put into practice that which at any given time has the greatest consensus. If it's 90% of humanity who agree to a given change, I would think that that would be sufficient. But if it's only 50%, or even just, the majority, a 55 or even a 60% of majority for a given change, a political change, an economic change, it will not be put into effect. And the advice would be that it is not ready for change, because it wouldn't last. There are very powerful forces in the world who see things in different ways. Always has been like that, and that habit of seeing things in a particular way has become institutionalized. And the habit, the conditioning is so strong, the glamour goes so deep, that humanity as a whole, which is now 6.5 billion people, is going to take a long time and with much heart searching to find a consensus. So you should not look for dramatic changes in the immediate future. The changes will take place bit by bit with the minimum of upset, the minimum of destruction or conflict in the societies of the world, so that it is acceptable. Whatever is acceptable will be implemented. Where it's not acceptable, it will be held over until it is acceptable. And it will only be acceptable when trust is created. That trust will be created by the economic change. The number one change, the answer to all our problems, really, the starting point of the answer to all our problems is in the change in the economic redistribution of the world's resources, which, as I've said over and over again, the Master's written over and over again, is the key to all further changes, because it creates trust. And when you create trust, all things become possible. Then you get changes in the political field. Changes in the political field make changes in the economic field easier, and these make easier changes in the purely practical field of looking after the planet. Then not only America, but the Europeans, Japan, and some of the more powerful industrialized nations will have to look very seriously at their plans for implementing an agreement like the Kyoto Agreement, but further agreements which will be brought forward and signed by large numbers of groups. In this situation, the United Nations will become the key factor. Then it will come into its own. And unfortunately today, the United Nations as an institution is deeply frowned on by the more right-wing groups in the United States. It's a saving grace, I think, that United Nations is actually, the building is actually in New York. If it were in London or Geneva or Darjeeling or Tokyo, a large section of the United States would have nothing to do with it. They wouldn't pay the dues, they would do nothing, they would be very obstructive in everything the United Nations wanted to do. And yet, the world owes United Nations a tremendous debt. It is one of the great educators of the world. It is one of the great medical sources for millions and millions of people. Healthcare for groups who have no other means of healthcare, no other outlets for reaching an adequate healthcare, are reliant on the United Nations agencies for such healthcare as they receive. Without the United Nations, which is a triumph of modern society, millions and millions of people would go wanting even more than they do. So you must give every ounce of strength and support to the United Nations. Whenever you hear it questioned, as I do all the time by fundamentalists and when I'm doing a radio broadcast or something like that, and they're affronted at the idea. They think that's what I am. I'm creating communism in the world. And, you know, they got rid of it in Russia. Why should I try to create communism in America? They don't know how lazy I am. And it's so stupid. Anyway, they do, and they think that United Nations is central to this plot of bringing communism. Behind the United Nations is probably this guy Maitreya, you know? And the whole thing is a communistic plot to bring the evil of socialism into the purified sphere of right-wing economics, which is strangling the people of the world wherever it can. And way back in the Agni Yoga books, Maitreya, in the first book, The Call, which he wrote, he gave the call, Maitreya said, there was a time when 10 true men could save the world. Then came a time when 10,000 wasn't enough. I shall call on 1 billion. There are 6 and a bit billion people in the world in incarnation at the moment. A couple or 3 or so years ago, I asked my master, that billion, has he got the million? Has Maitreya actually got the billion? He said, 1.5 billion. And that's been up since then. It's over 1.5 billion people ready to respond to Maitreya. Ready, when he gives the word, to come forward and to give their talents, to give their goodwill, to put into effect, to gather around him, to help and aid in every way. Maitreya will set up pioneer corps which will go around the world implementing, administering the changes in the, first of all, in the economic field, in the political field, and then when these are somewhat met, the restoration of the planet to health. And as you know, my master said many times, Maitreya has said it too in the messages from Maitreya, this will be the #1 priority in the world. This is the bed on which we lie. This is the source of our being, this planet Earth. And yet we are destroying it with every day that passes. We are ruining the fabric of our world in so many different ways. I don't have to spell it all out. And so it will become the #1 need for all people to work. Every man, every woman, every child even. And children are marvelous. When you set a child of, you know, anything from 7 to 15, the work of saving the planet, they'll do it better than anybody else. Not on the high scientific levels, but on the immediate level. They will make their mothers and fathers save and make a sustainable economy. Because unless we have a sustainable economy, we won't have any economy at all. If it's not sustainable, the world has maybe another 15 years of life to give that we can stand, and then it will deteriorate very, very rapidly. So we have maybe 15 to 20 years to restore the world to health, which we can do with the overseeing advice of the masters, the recommendations of the masters, certain tools which the masters will make available to help the process, and the help of our space brothers in the cleaning up of our planet, the cleaning of the, or especially of the air of the planet, the very air we breathe, which is so polluted today, above all with nuclear radiation, which we don't even recognize as a major polluting factor. It is not only one of the worst, it is the most dangerous. Dangerous to our immune system, and with a life which can go on for thousands and thousands of years. Also our oceans, our rivers, our lakes and streams, the earth itself, all of that is polluted to a terrific degree and has to be cleaned up, and in fact is ongoingly cleaned up within karmic limits by our space brothers. When Maitreya makes himself known, he will answer questions on a wide variety of factors, obviously. And one of them will be to do with the UFO phenomenon. And of course there is a connection between the intense interest and activity of the UFOs, which is mainly one of salvage, but also they have been concerned for many years in creating what they call a platform for the world teacher. A platform which is of different kinds. It is a platform of unification and an energetic platform. They have been engaged in creating an energetic network throughout the world. The so-called corn circles are an outer expression of this grid of energy which they have and are in the course of making. They are replicating on the physical plane the magnetic network of magnetic energy which surrounds the planet, surrounds every planet, and they are making a replica on the physical plane of this magnetic network. and this will be part of the new types of energy which will be introduced eventually to the world. And so the con circles are not just to say we are here, certainly for that, but we are here for a certain purpose. Maitreya will answer questions about the reality of the Space Brothers, but those who expect, fleets of Space Brothers to come down and land in Times Square or Piccadilly Circus will wait a long time. As I have said many times, they are etheric. They are not dense physical. They are etheric physical, and the dense physical aspect which they have when you see them is a temporary one. They simply lower the vibrational rate until they're seen, but they rise again and then they disappear. So don't expect hundreds of thousands of simultaneous landings, the introduction by Maitreya of the head of the Venusian fleet and the Martian fleet, and so on. It isn't going to be like that. And anybody who suggests that it is eating that very large melon called glamour there's a melon called glamour? Oh no, it's not called glamour. It's called watermelon. Yes, it's a watermelon. Yes, not glamour, but water and glamour, the glamour of the astral plane, the plane of water. You know what I mean.